Morning. The committee will come to order. Special thanks to our witnesses who have traveled to our nation's capital and taken time away from their busy schedules to be with us here today. We're pleased to be joined today by our colleagues, Representatives Mr. Reichert from Washington. Mr. Kine had intended to be with us, but something came up from Wisconsin who's unable to be with us today. But they together introduced H.R. 2096, the Promotion and Expansion of Private Employee Ownership Act of 2015. So it's a bipartisan bill. We've provided a copy of the section by section of the bill for the members' information. I'm also pleased to welcome some very special guests from the Warren County, Ohio, part of my district, who are in the audience here today. With National Small Business Week right around the corner, we must do all we can to support America's 28 million small businesses, which are responsible for 7 out of every new job created in America today. As part of that effort, I believe that small companies in my home state of Ohio have an important story to tell about what's worked so well for them. In many ways, Ohio's small businesses can serve as a model for small businesses nationwide. I'm very happy that 2 of our witnesses, Jay Hardy and Pete Strange, have strong ties to Ohio, and they will share their stories about one critical way we can support them and job creators like them all across America. Our country was founded on the idea that free markets and free enterprise provide the best economic compass for a free people. At the heart of this issue is the relationship between employers, their employees, and the customers they serve. Too often, government red tape and our broken tax code interfere with this relationship, doing a disservice to all involved. Our economy works best when America's entrepreneurs are free to make their own decisions, take their own risk, and run their businesses as they see fit, free from government interference. That's exactly what employee stock ownership programs, or ESOPs, do. If companies so choose, they can convert employees into owners who share in the profits of the company. This equity lets them share in the American dream and have a stake in their own future. It also helps them to save money as they plan for their golden years. S corporations have only been allowed to form ESOPs since 1998. Since then, the research has reinforced what we hear from small businesses all the time. This structure works, and it works especially well for small companies. H.R. 2096 would provide additional help for S corporations interested in forming ESOPs, strengthening these important vehicles, that being the ESOPs, as vehicles that more and more companies would be able to take advantage of to help their employees. I'm looking forward to hearing from our very distinguished panel of witnesses here this morning. And at this time, I would like to yield to the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. As part of their retirement plan, Americans have traditionally relied on employer-based options. For small firms, however, providing such plans is a two-pronged challenge. They not only have to set up and administer the plan, but enroll their employees as well. This resource and time-intensive process has resulted in only 14% of small firms offering such a benefit. A recent approach to helping more small companies provide for their employees is through employee stock ownership plans, or ESOPs, a type of defined contribution retirement plan. Companies using this plan not only provide a retirement savings vehicle, but also provide more stable employment than other businesses. Reports have shown that they even outperform the S&P 500 Total Returns Index in terms of total return by participant by 62%, and distribution to participants totaled nearly $30 billion in a decade. These numbers are impressive and merit a closer look at ESOPs. We must also investigate why more small businesses aren't using this beneficial plan. Today's hearing will give us that opportunity. While the ESOP has only existed for a short while, we're seeing the benefit to employers, employees, and the national economy. In fact, the number of ESOPs have more than doubled since 2002, proving they're worth the trouble and expense for business to use. Nevertheless, the ESOP is still a very foreign concept for many small business owners, whether it's due to a lack of awareness or intimidation from the complex rules, I hope to find out today where the primary challenges lies for small firms. But whatever the reason is, we should be doing more to enlighten employers and make it more attractive retirement vehicle. As our population ages, it is critical that small employers and their employees have access to quality financial security in their retirement years. We have made strides to enroll more workers through the MIRA, a payroll deduction account, and state-sponsored retirement savings plans like automatic IRAs and multiply employer plans. But we can do better, and ESOPs are one option. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the advantages of ESOPs and what challenges face owners who decide they are the right move for their business. Today's discussion about HR 2096 will also help educate members on the bill and how it is meant to attract small business employers to this plan. In advance to the testimonies, I want to thank all the witnesses for both your participation and insights into this important topic. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. If committee members have opening statements prepared, I'd ask that they submit them for the record. And now take just a couple moments to explain our timing system that we have here. It's a 5-minute rule that we operate by. It's pretty simple. You'll have a lighting system to help you out. The green light stays on for 4 minutes, and then a yellow light will come on and let you know you got about a minute to wrap up. When the red light comes on, we'd ask you to try to stay within that if possible. If you go over a little bit, we'll give you a little flexibility, but not a lot. So we'd ask you try to do that, and we hold ourselves to the same 5-minute rules, and we're stricter there than we are with you all. So, and we'll begin by introducing our witnesses. Our first witness will be Pete Strange, who's Chairman Emeritus of Messer Incorporated, which is based in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio. Messer Inc. is the parent company of Messer Construction Company, a regional general contractor and construction manager, and Messer Financial Services, a diversified investment firm. Mr. Strange served as Messer's chairman from 1990 through 2013, so for 23 years. He has also served on a variety of community and industry boards in Cincinnati, including the Cincinnati branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber of Commerce, among others. Our second witness will be Jay Hardy, president of Hardy Diagnostics in Santa Maria, California, and also in our district. This morning, Mr. Hardy will be testifying on behalf of the Warren County Chamber Alliance of Warren County, Ohio. Hardy Diagnostic manufactures over 3,500 different products used in microbiology laboratories. Currently, they have 2 manufacturing facilities, one in Santa Maria, California, and the other located in Springboro, Warren County, Ohio, which, as I mentioned before, is in our district. Our third witness today is Alex Brill, who's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. here. Mr. Brill is also the CEO of Matrix Global Advisors, a Washington, D.C.-based economic policy consulting firm. Prior to this, Mr. Brill was the policy director and chief economist of the House Ways and Means Committee. He also served as an advisor to the Simpson-Bowles Bipartisan Deficit Reduction Commission and as staff economist to the White House Council of Economic Advisors. So welcome all three of you here, and I would now like to yield to the ranking member for the purpose of introducing our fourth witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Stephanie Silverman, President and Executive Director at the employee-owned S Corporations of America. She's also founder and CEO of Venn Strategies, LLC. Before launching her own firm, Stephanie was a senior advisor in the Washington, D.C. government relations practice of Mannett, Phelps, and Phillips, a national firm specializing in matters of national and international policy. She holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Business and an undergraduate degree from Duke University. Welcome.
Thank you. Now, having introduced our panel, we'll hear from them, and we'll begin with Mr. Strange. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify before you today to share my story of inclusive capitalism and the impact it has had upon hundreds of my fellow employees at Messer Construction. Thank you for holding this hearing to learn more about ESOPs and legislation that can encourage more businesses to become employee-owned. My name is Pete Strange, and I began working at Messer Construction as a project engineer in 1968. I retired from management a couple of years ago after 23 years as CEO. Mine is the tale of two careers. In 1968, Messer was a Cincinnati-based, medium-sized, family-owned construction company with a long history and a good reputation. But like most companies in construction, it had little in the way of employee benefits. By 1990, company-funded retirement benefits totaled only $1.5 million on behalf of 99 participants. In 1998, the last son of the company founder died, and we found ourselves with an uncertain future. The grandchildren of the founder wanted access to their wealth, and having no connection with the employees, were not committed to maintaining employment at the company. In 1990, the Messer employees were able to buy their future from the Messer family using the ESOP structure. I led the employee group through those negotiations, so I can tell you firsthand that we employees could not have purchased the company if not for the important tax advantages that the ESOP model afforded us. Our country's investment in ESOPs allowed 99 Messer employees to purchase our future, and the engagement that opportunity created has resulted in growth. Today, operating from 9 regional offices, Messer performs more than $1 billion in construction annually, focusing upon healthcare, higher education, and life sciences projects. And here is the measure of the change that our ESOP brought to our retirement savings. Messer now provides quality jobs and predictable retirement for over 1,000 individuals and has company-funded retirement assets for those employees totaling more than $220 million. Through our engagement with the employee-owned S Corporations of America, we've come to know of hundreds of companies with stories similar to ours, and the data from ESCA's quality research shows that ESOP companies are more robust, more sustainable, and provide higher levels of diversified retirement benefits than non-ESOP companies. The Messer ESOP is in place and it's working well for us. However, Messer manages a vendor supply chain of small local subcontractors who are increasingly at risk from forces both external and internal. Creating a more supportive environment for those companies to form ESOPs, both for the benefit of their employees and to reduce the risk and volatility that results from unplanned succession, will be a direct benefit to our communities, to our customers, and to our company as we compete in a global economy. I've had only one employer in my more than 40-year career, but I've had 2 completely different employment opportunities. Messer is a clear example of the power of inclusive capitalism that results from supporting sub-S ESOPs. I invite you to visit us or an employee-owned company in your district or state so you can feel firsthand the pride employee owners take in their work and the confidence that employee owners have in their future. Mr. Chairman and committee members, I thank you for this opportunity to address the committee and share Messer's story, and for your consideration of legislation that will allow more hardworking Americans to share in the American dream at work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Mr. Hardy, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to thank Chairman Chabot today for inviting me to voice my support of H.R. 2096 and the proposed incentives to increase employee ownership in America. I would also like to thank Ranking Member Velasquez and the other members of the Small Business Committee. My name is Jay Hardy. I'm the president and founding partner of Hardy Diagnostics, a medical device manufacturer based in California with a manufacturing facility in Ohio and Texas. We've been in business for 36 years servicing the laboratory industry, and we currently have 350 employees. 4 years ago, I sold 70% of my shares to our newly formed ESOP. Last year, I sold the remaining shares, making our company 100% employee-owned S Corporation. I've never had any regrets in making this decision, which has set our company on a course of increased growth and prosperity for the reasons that I'd like to describe for you today. Since becoming an ESOP, our company has grown by 78%, so I think the numbers speak for themselves. The ESOP structure was defined in Congress as a part of the ERISA laws in 1974. Just as Abraham Lincoln's Homestead Act of 1862 created wealth for ordinary citizens by granting them 160 acres of land, the ESOP also has the potential to create wealth for all Americans without having to own land. Within the ESOP, employees are granted shares of the company they work for without cost to them or taxation. Currently, there are over 11 million ESOP participants in America. This number needs to grow, and here's why. Recent studies have shown that ESOP companies are 25% more likely to stay in business than non-ESOPs. Employee owners were 4 times less likely to get laid off during our last recession. Employee owners have 2.5 times more money in their retirement accounts than non-ESOP employees. Employee owners receive 5 to 12% more in wages than non-ESOP employees. Employee owners are 5 to 10% more productive than their non-ESOP counterparts. So you can see that ESOPs are undoubtedly a very good thing for the American worker, and thus very good for the American economy in general. Today we hear a lot of talk about income inequality and capitalism being good only for the privileged 1%. Why can't capitalism be accessible for all American workers by owning a portion of the companies that they work for? While capitalism may have its flaws, the modern ESOP provides a way to correct those flaws. This is why the ESOP has been nicknamed universal capitalism, or capitalism for the masses. The employee owners turn out to be highly motivated because they know that their efforts will be directly rewarded through an increase in share value. This in turn makes the American ESOP more able to successfully compete in the world market. Today, many workers are afraid that Social Security or their meager 401k savings will not be adequate for their retirement. The ESOP will substantially supplement those retirement programs in a very significant way. The original idea of employee ownership came from Louis Kelso, who formed the first ESOP in 1956. He said, quote, "The trouble with today's finance is that they're designed to make the rich richer. None is designed to make the poor richer." He also said, quote, "If capital ownership is good for the rich, it's 1,000 times better for the middle class and the poor." The workers at Hardy Diagnostics now know that their daily work is not drudgery, but rather an exciting investment in their own personal financial future. In preparation for this testimony today, I asked the employee owners of our company to provide me with their own thoughts about the ESOP which they own. One of them said, quote, "Since becoming an ESOP, I have found an avenue in which every employee has an opportunity to be engaged in our company's steady climb of growth. As a manager, nothing's more rewarding than seeing individuals in my department with such a high level of enthusiasm for the success of our company, as well as their own personal growth and achievements." Another employee owner said, quote, "Being a part of an ESOP breaks down title barriers. We all have the same title, owner. Ownership inspires greater value and satisfaction in our daily work. Our work turns into an investment. It's no longer just a job." So I think you get the idea. H.R. 2096 is an excellent piece of legislation that provides the necessary incentives for S-Corp business owners to create an employee ownership program. This will make the S-Corp ESOP a very attractive exit plan for business owners that wish to do the right thing in turning the ownership of their companies over to workers who made the business successful. H.R. 2096 also provides incentives for banks to fund the loans that make this transaction possible. Capitalism, for all its flaws, remains the best economic system the world has ever known. Let's improve upon it by putting true ownership within reach of all American workers through the wealth-building program of the modern ESOP. I'm passionate about employee ownership, and I enjoy being an evangelist for the ESOP movement here in America. I thank you once again, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Brill, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee to discuss the role of S-ESOPs in the U.S. economy. Allow me to summarize my written testimony, which has been submitted for the record. S-ESOPs, defined contribution retirement plans that allow employees to become owners in their employer, exist across a wide spectrum of industries and include a meaningful number of U.S. employees. S-ESOPs can improve worker commitment, increase firm productivity, reduce worker turnover, and lower production costs. S-ESOPs proved resilient in the face of the most recent recession and thereby helped mitigate the adverse effects of the recession on SESOP's suppliers and related business activities. A few specific facts. The number of SESOPs has increased 131% from 2002 through 2013, reaching 2,626 by my count. This increase has been steady year over year, aside from a slight dip during the recessionary period in 2008. More important, however, than the trend in the number of SESOPs is the increase in the number of employee owners working at these firms. The number of active participants at SESOPs increased 167%, from almost 200,000 people in the year 2002 to over 520,000 in the year 2013. Since 2008 alone, active participants at SESOPs have increased 30%. It should be noted that because not all employees are necessarily SESOP owners, the number of active participants, the statistics I was just citing, is a conservative estimate of employment by these firms. Now, some of the growth in SESOP employment is attributable to firms hiring more workers, and some is attributable to the rising popularity of SESOPs generally. In other words, this large increase in SESOP employment I just described does not entirely represent just organic job growth within SESOPs. It also reflects firms converting to SESOP status. I analyzed a subset of all the SESOPs, those operating consistently from the period 2002 through 2014, and found that in these firms, employment grew 30%, while at the same period, overall U.S. employment grew just 6%. Now, a word about the economic evidence. ESOPs tend to perform better than their peers, and the mechanism by which this occurs is, at least in part, the additional commitment workers make as they become owners in their firms. This is particularly important in the small business context. The success of small and medium-sized enterprises is often reliant on the ability of firms to ensure their employees work effectively and cohesively. Higher worker commitment and lower turnover rates are key components for small business success in an increasingly competitive marketplace. By strengthening this worker commitment to their employer, the SESOP structure can help foster efficiency and increase productivity and grow output. But I would also like to stress that the benefits of SESOPs are not limited just to their firms and their employees. The demonstrated resilience of SESOPs benefit the whole economy. For example, during a recession, bankruptcy for small businesses is not uncommon, and this can have a domino effect, imposing financial hardships not only on workers, but on the firm's suppliers and other local businesses. To the extent that SESOPs mitigate these effects through their resilience, they represent and offer a positive externality to the economy. In conclusion, as the U.S. seeks to rebound from a period of tepid productivity growth, SESOPs are a valuable tool in promoting growth not only among small businesses, but indirectly in the economy overall. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Silverman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Stephanie Silverman, and I am President and Executive Director of the Employee-Owned S Corporations of America. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the success of S corporations that are owned by their employees, or S corporation ESOPs, and on bipartisan legislation to expand employee ownership. ESCO represents S-ESOP companies in every state, in industries from heavy manufacturing to construction to school photography. Since first being allowed to form in 1998, the nearly 3,000 S-ESOP companies in the U.S. now account for $92 billion in direct output to the U.S. economy each year. 20 years ago, Congress passed legislation creating S-ESOPs. Congress's goal was to encourage employee ownership of private industry, enable workers to benefit from their labor, and create a path for building meaningful retirement savings. Data show that today SESOPs are doing precisely that. 20 years later, private SESOP companies have been a remarkable success story, a bright spot in an economy characterized by sluggish growth, anemic job creation, and worker insecurity. Many studies by renowned economists from across the ideological spectrum illustrate how SESOPs are powerful for workers as a retirement savings and economic security tool, and how they have contributed to communities and to the national economy. I will touch on a few key points from the most recent studies. Earlier this year, economist Jared Bernstein released a study that shows SESOPs reduce wage and wealth inequality. Bernstein also found ESOP companies pay their workers better wages and provide them with more stable employment than other comparable businesses. With Congress searching for solutions for boosting worker savings, job prospects, and wages, the SESOP success story reminds us this goal can be reached through capital ownership shared among workers. At a time when almost half of working Americans do not have any retirement plan at work, SESOPs also provide unparalleled worker retirement savings opportunities. As Ranking Member Velasquez recently noted, between 2002 and 2012, SESOPs outperformed the S&P 500, and their net assets increased over 300%, allowing them to distribute nearly $30 billion in retirement savings to their employee owner participants. The savings benefit to employees does not come with additional risk, moreover. Private employee-owned businesses are proven to be more stable than their counterparts. In 2014, the National Center for Employee Ownership released data showing that the default rate on bank loans to private ESOP companies was an astonishingly low 0.2% annually. This compares to mid-market companies defaulting on loans at a rate 10 times higher or greater. 8 years ago, as members of Congress began to hear from companies and workers in their districts, they began asking, what can Congress do to encourage more SESOPs to form? The answer to that question prompted what is currently H.R. 2096, the Promotion and Expansion of Private Employee Ownership Act. First introduced by Congressman Ron Kind in the 111th Congress, the bill has been introduced in the subsequent 3 Congresses led by Congressman Dave Reichert and Mr. Kind. Today, it has 67 bipartisan co-sponsors, including 21 members of the Tax Writing Ways and Means Committee, and in the Senate, the counterpart, S. 1212, has 28 co-sponsors. In short, that bill would provide incentives to owners of S corporations to sell their stock to an ESOP. Today, those incentives exist, but only for owners of C corporations. Section 1042 of the tax code allows a C corporation owner to defer the recognition of gains when the owner sells shares to an ESOP. Extending parity to S corporation owners is the single most significant legislative action that Congress can take to encourage more of the millions of S corporation owners to choose an ESOP when they consider how to transition their businesses from their current ownership structure. It also would encourage banks to lend to S ESOPs to create more ESOP ownership of companies. Under the proposal, banks could deduct 50% of interest income on certain loans made to an ESOP. Employees often lack the funds to buy a company directly, and not all banks understand the ESOP structure, which may cause them to limit lending to these vibrant businesses. This incentive can address those challenges. It would provide assistance to would-be SESOP companies through an Employee Ownership Assistance Office at Treasury, and it would permit an SBA-certified small business to remain eligible for SBA programs after becoming majority-owned by an ESOP. Quite simply, more SESOPs mean more worker savings, more wealth and wage equality, and more job stability. That is why we hope this committee and your colleagues in Congress will help advance this vital measure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the questioning part, and I'll begin with myself, and I'll begin with you, Mr. Strange, if I can. Where do you expect that your company would be now had it not converted to an ESOP back in 1990? I know it's impossible to know that, but if you could try.
The opportunities that the family considered, in addition to selling to the employees, were to sell the assets, we had some equipment and property, or to sell to a larger construction company. What is certain is that the company would not exist and would probably not be housed in Cincinnati, Ohio, if the employees had not purchased it. And what is equally certain is that the math worked in our favor. Because of the rollover, the sellers were able to get a better deal from us. And because of the long-term thinking of the ESOP, we described Messer as a get-rich-slow scheme, we were able to amortize our efforts in buying the capital over a much longer period of time than a normal financial buyer would have.
Thank you. And so how many employees were impacted at that time then as a result of this?
99. There were 99 employees in a recently formed, it was 4 years old, profit-sharing plan that had the $1.5 million in it. Prior to that, we had no retirement plan because the hardy independent folks in construction thought we ought to fend for ourselves.
Okay. And one thing that I can testify to is when you drive around the greater Cincinnati area, you'll see an awful lot of construction going on with the Messer name on there. So they do a lot of work all over the place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy, I'll go to you next if I can. What changes did you notice in your company and employees, especially after it became employee-owned?
There were a lot of changes. I think one, it would be more enthusiasm for their jobs. In the past, it was kind of a problem. People punch in, they punch out. Some of them weren't fully engaged in what we're doing. But I've seen a remarkable change over the last 4 years. They're getting very, very interested, and we're teaching them business practices. All of our employees learn a little bit about how to interpret financial statements. They look at income statements and balance sheets. We're also an open book management company, so all the books are open. All of our employees, they can see how we're doing month to month, and they appreciate that. Whether it's good news or bad news, they see all that. So I think there's just more of a spirit of cooperation. Productivity is up, sales are up. It's just been a terrific change for our company.
Thank you. Mr. Brill, as you've studied employee-owned companies over the years, what are the most compelling factors you've found that contribute to their success? And also, what would you say are the biggest barriers that you've identified to the creation of more ESOP companies?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the evidence, both the survey evidence and some of the empirical research, really mirrors the testimony that Mr. Hardy just offered, that workers are more enthusiastic. The terminology I use in my testimony is worker commitment, but these are basically the same notions, that the workers feel better about going to work, that they're more willing to work hard, to put in a little extra, to stay a little late. They're more aware of the surroundings, more willing to offer suggestions to their managers about how things could be done better and more efficiently. There's evidence that employees in ESOP structures, SESOPs included, require less management, and so that's a cost saving. If you need fewer managers to keep an eye on the workers, you're saving money knowing that the employees are motivated themselves for hard work.
Thank you. And any barriers that you've seen?
It does seem surprising that there are not more SESOPs, to be frank, and I'm not quite sure why that is. There seems to be some sort of breakdown in the communication in the marketplace about owners and founders not being aware of these tools.
Well, perhaps because of the huge following that we have in this committee over the C-SPAN coverage that we get, that there will be far more
Hopefully.
soon. Thank you. And I'm almost out of time, but let me turn to you, Ms. Silverman. How safe are ESOPs when employees have their retirement savings tied up, to the success of the business? Would you comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question, I think, speaks to the issue of diversification. And I think that it's important to understand that SESOPs provide some of the most diversified retirement opportunities. First, because ERISA requires the ESOP structure to allow for diversification. As an employee gets further along in their tenure and older, ERISA requires a company to allow employees to begin diversifying out of the ESOP plan. Second, while most U.S. companies, about half of U.S. companies, don't offer any retirement savings at work, the ESOP is a plan in every ESOP company. And then about 85% of ESCA's members offer at least one additional plan at work. Usually that's a 401k plan, but it can be a profit-sharing plan as well. I think you'll find that the culture of employee ownership encourages companies to take better care of their workers.
Thank you very much. And my time's expired. I'll now yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brill, and maybe Ms. Silverman, I am interested to know if any of you have analyzed how many minority small business owners have adopted ESOPs, and how can we encourage more minority small businesses to adopt ESOPs?
There hasn't been a full analysis of the question, but I can tell you from anecdotal evidence that there are too few minority business owners that have adopted the structure. I would attribute that from my own experience to a few factors. Number one, there's a certain level of education that company owners need to have. Only more sophisticated companies currently have access to the informational resources that they need to form these structures. Number two, as you yourself have noted in the past, there are capital access challenges for minority-owned businesses that are unfortunately disproportionate to the broader universe of small companies. We believe that encouraging banks to provide more capital access for purposes of transitioning to an ESOP will help to overcome that.
Mr. Brill, do you have any comments?
I don't.
No.
No, I don't.
Mr. Strange, you helped lead the 99 employees in their buyout of Messer. What is the process for establishing an ESOP, and how expensive and time-consuming was this process?
The challenge was in coming to common ground with the sellers. In our case, the sellers were not motivated by the welfare of the employees or even the continuity or sustainability of the enterprise. And so we spent considerable time in negotiating what was defined as a fair price. I do believe the perception of expense in creating an ESOP is a significant barrier for smaller companies. In our case, we used almost all local consultants. We have one national evaluation firm that worked with us, and we found it to not be unbearably expensive, which was really important because we did not have access to capital. And so that was very important for us.
Thank you. Ms. Silverman, a major drawback that I see in using an ESOP is it can jeopardize a small business eligibility to participate in both the SBA and VA programs. The treatment of ESOP stock as either outstanding or excluded is critical to this determination. In fact, it became a problem for one service disabled veteran-owned small businesses who lost the designation because of their ESOP. How can you please explain this issue generally and how the legislation, HR 2096, addresses it? And yeah.
I think you raise a very important question, Congressman Velasquez, and let me say this. There are very important concerns that remain to be rectified in the area of preserving minority and woman-owned and veteran-owned status. There are ways to structure additional provisions, which we're currently looking at, and we would be open to working with your office on, that would enable an ESOP company, if it had that designation prior to forming an ESOP, to retain that designation, not to have special privileges, but simply not to lose its privileges. So there are ways of rectifying that.
So do you agree with me that Section 6 of the bill is not enough?
I agree with you that we would love to work with you on an expansion that includes more companies, yes.
Okay. So could I have I will ask any one of the panelists to comment or react to this question. We have heard the benefit ESOPs hold for retiring business owners, but what about employees? What advantages does an ESOP have for them? Yes, Mr. Strange.
The average turnover in commercial construction across the country is 28% per year. The ESOP, because of the longer-term thinking, the deeper engagement, ours is a very, very small percentage of that. That level of stability allows employees to have better control of their future. The ESOP process requires communication with the employees, both to be successful and by rule, having the information to make informed decisions about an individual's own future and their family's future is a huge differentiator. And finally, the requirement that you have an independent valuation each year gives a level of discipline to strategic planning that we never had before.
The gentlelady's time's expired.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being here. And this is for the full panel. What is the ideal type of company that can benefit from transitioning to employee ownership? Is it a better fit for any special type of company like construction, manufacturing, et cetera, versus other types? Or is there any type of companies that should not become ESOPs?
I think that it's important to understand that an ESOP can make a good company great, but it can't make a bad company good. And so I would say that from our experience, we don't believe that the ESOP structure is a good idea for companies that are in jeopardy or look at it as a way to salvage a business that's otherwise at risk. For reasons outside of the ESOP structure. Companies that tend to be more capital intensive benefit more from the ESOP structure. But we have seen ESOPs be very successful in service businesses as much as in manufacturing and other kinds of companies. I think it's important also to keep in mind that because, as Mr. Hardy has suggested, they offer such a thoughtful way to transition ownership from an exiting owner or founder, a company that is founded by an individual or group of individuals where there's no obvious successor available, that makes a very good candidate for an SESOP structure, especially when the alternatives are private equity or a large foreign acquirer.
Mr. Brill, did you have any?
Thank you. I would echo Ms. Silverman's comments. We observe in the data SESOPs operating across a wide spectrum of industries today, both capital intensive as well as service. The 7 largest, for your information, industries that are home to SESOPs are healthcare, manufacturing, retail trade, finance and insurance, professional services, construction, and wholesale trade. Together, these 7 industries represent approximately 70% of all the active participants in SESOPs. You see how diverse a set that is.
And this is for you, Mr. Brill, and you may not know the answer to this, but the SESOPs, you talked a little bit about during the recession, the formation of them wasn't quite as much. But how did they weather the recession as opposed to other similar type businesses? Did they do better or worse, or do you know?
We do have information on that question, both from research that I've done as well as other economists who've looked at that very issue. In general, SESOPs outperformed similar companies during that period, 2007, 2008, 2009. We saw overall in the economy not only a significant decline in overall employment, but a very slow rebound in employment, as everyone on this committee is well aware, with total employment not reaching its pre-recessionary levels until sometime in 2014. Within the SESOP community, there was a drop-off, as there was across the whole economy, but a rather sharp rebound. And by 2009, I believe, the number of active participants in SESOPs had exceeded its previous high. So that's the resilience to which I was suggesting earlier. That's not only good for the workers who didn't lose their jobs because their firms are more committed to them as they are more committed to their firms, but it's also good for the non-ESOPs in their community, whether it be the sandwich shop across the street or the supplier to those companies.
And it's really not surprising to me that when you allow people to be vested in something and to have to work and to earn it, that they appreciate and the benefits are coming to them, that they work harder. So I thank y'all. But very briefly, Ms. Silverman, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that Congress has about the ESOP companies?
I think that the single biggest misconception is that it's a lack of diversification, that employees are at risk somehow because they have retirement savings tied up in the fate of their company. I think that the truth is that diversification is a very real phenomenon, more so in an SESOP company than virtually any other comparable company in the economy that we know of. They generate a lot more retirement savings individually, but they have much more diversified plans and a much more, I think, thoughtful compliance structure to ensure that employees are taken care of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and witnesses, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Hahn, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chabot and Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for being here and testifying before us. And Mr. Hardy, you mentioned it first, and it's true. Every time you turn on the TV, or particularly during this political season, we always hear someone talking about income inequality. And it's clear that the American people are concerned about that, and those wishing to lead our country in the future are concerned about that. And while we're constantly hearing, I think both sides of the aisle have been talking about how to address these concerns, it's been really amazing to hear from our witnesses today that proves you don't have to choose between people and profits. You can follow business practices that actually promote both. Mr. Hardy, I really wanted to commend you for taking the risk and making your company a 100% employee-owned corporation. It's clear that your risk paid off. Your growth has been pretty phenomenal. I just kind of want to know what inspired you to make this change? And we've heard about the education that needs to take place to sort of make this transition. And what inspired you, and who answered all your questions that you must have had going through this? Is there someone in our Small Business Administration that has been helpful?
Very good question. Well, for myself personally, I wanted to make sure that our company would outlive me. And I wanted to see that the company would go on and not be purchased by an outside company, because I wanted to protect the jobs that we worked so hard to gain. As far as outside advice, we have a company that we work with. It's a third-party administrator that gave us good legal and accounting advice. Kind of going back to what Congressman Kelly said, we were told at the time that if you have under 25 employees, it could be very costly and very difficult. We had over 100 at the time. We spent approximately, I think it was $25,000 to $30,000 in setting up our ESOP with our legal and accounting fees, which was less than I thought that it would cost. There are some ongoing fees, in administering the program, but it's definitely within reach. And there's a lot of people and a lot of organizations that do give help to companies like ours. The National Centers for Employee Ownership, NCEO, is one of them. The ESOP Association is another one of them. They have conventions that they hold. They're very, very supportive. They're promoting education amongst business owners.
So what would be your greatest piece of advice that you would give other businesses who are considering making this transition?
Like I said in my testimony, I think it's the right thing to do. It's good for the employees. My employees, they're the ones that created the profit. And I think it's only fair to them that they get to enjoy that profit that they work so hard for.
Thank you.
So they own it, and they're happy to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Silverman, I was just going to follow up on this whole education piece, because you mentioned a response to our ranking member's question about women-owned, minority-owned companies, and you sort of put the onus on maybe lack of education. How can we improve that? How can we improve that kind of outreach? Who is the right vehicle to actually administer this kind of education and outreach so that businesses could think about having more of an opportunity to transition to employee-owned?
Thank you for the question. We believe that the right central hub for information is probably the Treasury Department, because this is a law that combines tax policy and a defined benefits policy, or a defined contribution policy, excuse me. And so the combination of ERISA and taxes is a funky place to go for anybody other than the Treasury Department. I would say also that as Congress makes clear that it's more supportive and encouraging, I think it sends a message to the market. There was, for a time, a chilling effect. There was a worry that Congress would tinker with this in unintended ways and harm the structure. And the more that Congress provides support through rhetoric, through advancing policy that encourages this, I think small business owners will get the message.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time's expired. Gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Hardy, who is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Myself, my partner and I started an S-Corp some 2 decades ago, and had the privilege of employing quite a few people at our peak. We, at the time, when we started trying to distribute shares out to our company or portions of the company, did not know about the ESOP program until the economy became a little different. My question is, the reason we started bringing employees into our company is during the 2000 era there, we were growing very fast, and large corporations from overseas were looking at buying many companies up in Nevada, particularly for construction companies. And we did not want to sell. We had an opportunity to sell our company out, but because we care about our employees and enjoyed the type of craft that we were doing, we decided to work to where our employees could buy us up in a different direction. But then the things kind of changed, so once we heard about the ESOP, it was too late. Do you believe this is an opportunity with these ESOPs, created these ESOP companies to help protect against big overseas companies coming in and diluting and taking employees and changing the environment, which it has in the Las Vegas Valley, I can tell you for sure? Do you see that as a protection for jobs here at home?
I think absolutely. My answer to why do an ESOP is because it's a competitive advantage. The return we get on the professional development and training is longer and more profound, more engaged. Training that is part of an ownership culture is more engaging. If you look at the challenge that we have as project leaders in construction, there are about 7.5 million employees in commercial construction in this country. There are more than 500,000 employers. That is an invitation to someone having a financially driven consolidation plan, and ESOPs are protection that creates a people-focused plan for those companies. We think that we need to do more. And to the ranking member's question about minority firms, once it becomes not just a matter of how you're going to make a living, but how you're going to live your life, it changes how you invest in those areas as well. So I think it's a competitive advantage, and it is important protection.
This is to anybody on the panel who wants to answer it. How did you find out about the ESOP program?
I found out about it through attending some of these conventions and seminars that I mentioned. These are going on all the time. It just appealed to me. It's very worker friendly. As Mr. Strange said, it's just the best thing for them and their families. But there is a lot of information out there for people that want to seek it out.
I knew less than nothing, so I went to the library. All I learned in engineering school was two things. One was not to panic in the face of complexity, and the other was to respect data. So I just went down to the business desk and said, what's ownership look like? And they gave me some articles.
Thank you. one of the questions I would have as an owner myself in the past is this ESOP. How does it work with all different levels of the employee class? Can somebody answer, you've got, recently there was a casino in my hometown that just got purchased by an ESOP. How does that work with the different levels of employees?
I can try to answer that. Thank you for the question. ERISA requires that you treat all employees equally. There are guardrails to ensure that highly compensated individuals cannot take more, do better. So the casino worker in the mailroom is treated proportional to the CEO of the company. It is true also that people receive distributions. They all have to get distributions once they qualify. You can't distinguish between different shares of ownership. And I think another thing about an S corporation, which you may recall, Congressman Hardy, is that you can't have different classes of stock. So everybody has to be the same kind of a shareholder. There are also limitations on how high compensation can be treated for purposes of proportionality. So I think it's 200 or something, above 200 or something $1,000. It doesn't matter. They don't treat you as if you had any more money. It's intended to be a level playing field for everyone.
Thank you. I can see my time's expired.
Okay. Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, who's a ranking member of the Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations Subcommittee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Velasquez, thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for your testimony. Ms. Silverman, SBA guaranteed ESOP loans exist to help retiring business owners. So how common are these loans, and what can the proceeds be used for? And someone talked about the risks, and I'm curious about how well educated the employees are. I mean, I know you can get information on your own, but what kind of education do you do maybe as a company?
Thank you, Congresswoman Adams. I'm not familiar enough with the SBA loan program that enables the creation of SESOPs, but we can learn more and get back to your office on that question. I would say that with respect to risks, ERISA requires sharing a lot of information with would-be owners, bless you, before they become investors in the company. There's also a fiduciary who's named to be the guardian of the economic interests of the employee owners. And the fiduciary has to act separate and apart from the interest of the seller. That fiduciary is under law obliged to have certain evaluative skills and make decisions that are intended for the best interests of the employee owners and not necessarily in the best interests of the individual or group of individuals who are selling the company.
Okay. Let me ask, in terms of setting up an ESOP, it seems to be quite complex. So can you describe the impact of ESOPs on minority-owned firms and other disadvantaged owned firms? And anyone on the panel, Ms. Silverman, you can start.
I'm happy to speak to this, but I think others on the panel may have thoughts as well. I would say that it's getting easier. The more the SESOP model proliferates, the more providers and advisors know about it. And so while the SESOP knowledge core really existed in a handful of cities, it's interesting. We've seen that in the early days of SESOPs, really the companies that became SESOPs sprung up around city hubs where there were a handful of advisors who just knew how to do these transactions. And now, as the companies proliferate and expand, and as the data show how successful they are, not just for the companies, but for the employee owners who are amassing significant retirement savings, more providers and advisors are becoming aware. So I would say that the hurdles are less so. There are still things to be done. Ranking Member Velasquez noted in her question, that there are challenges with SBA rules, and there are still things to be done to ensure that a minority-owned business doesn't lose that special distinction when and if they convert to an ESOP. That would be an area we'd like to continue to work on.
All right. Would someone else like to respond? Yes, Mr. Hardy.
Yes, we had some personal experience with that just recently. We are growing as a company. We needed another building to be built on our street, and the first thing I always do is go to the SBA. And I've done this in the past. I think we've had 3 or 4 SBA loans in the past. When I applied this time, they shut me down and they said, no, we can't do that because you're now an ESOP. So that was very disappointing. And I was very glad to see that HR 2096 will fix that problem.
Yes, sir, Mr. Strange?
One observation I would make is that as we have worked with minority and women-owned businesses, because we have a goal, because of our company culture, to have inclusion on every project, we're very early in the life cycle for so many of these businesses. So if we look at, our spending last year was 20% of our total buy, and it's a couple of $100 million, but the large majority of those businesses have only been in business for 10 to 15 years. So I think there's a maturity issue here as these businesses continue to grow, as their entrepreneurial, originators age. If we have the structures around for them to get the education and support, we will see a lot more ESOPs.
Thank you. Enron's employee retirements were heavily invested in the company, so what lessons and safeguards can be learned from such a failure? Anyone?
I hate Enron. That's a lesson. What I would observe is what Ms. Silverman said. Bad leadership, bad strategy, bad ethics can't be saved by an ESOP. You need the foundation in place if you're going to build a building on it.
Great. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. And before we adjourn, I just have one quick question. I think I'll direct this at you, Pete. In being in the construction industry, you have a lot of tools and building materials and things like that. And I know that in that there's sometimes a temptation for employees things to disappear here and there. With an ESOP, is there an attitude that, hey, this stuff belongs to me too, all of us, this is my stuff? So is there maybe a disincentive for people to do that sort of thing, or what?
It's dangerous to start me on stories. In the 25 years we've been in ESOP, we have not had a purchase order system. Any employee of Messer can walk into any supplier, and if they're smart enough to rattle off some number as a job number, they can walk out of there with anything. We have had almost zero loss and leakage from that. The feeling of responsibility that this is something that is mine, not something that's theirs, is transformational.
Thank you very much. We want to thank all the witnesses for their testimony here, really excellent. And I think we've heard ample evidence that ESOPs are good for the companies, for their employees, and for the economy as a whole. And I think as a result of hearing this, I would announce that I am going to direct my staff to put me on as a co-sponsor of this legislation. So we appreciate your testimony very much. And I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.